Hello and welcome to the new episode of Orbital. I am Chaitanya Giri. In this episode, we will be discussing the recent launch of the 36 OneWeb satellites. These satellites were launched by India's, that is, New Space India Limited's GSLV Mark III, which is these days called as the LVM-3. Now, what was so special about this launch? This launch had many consequences for the Indian space program. We'll look at it one by one. OneWeb needs to be congratulated first for nearly completing the entire global constellation in a short span of 3 years. And despite the financial hurdles that this company had faced. After Starlink, which is the flagship satellite telecommunication product of SpaceX, OneWeb becomes the second constellation of its sort. And India should be really happy that it had made good contributions while launching the nearly 650 satellites that OneWeb had really planned for in this particular constellation. So what's the history of OneWeb? Let's look at it. And where did India come in? It's an exciting story. OneWeb began as Worldview. Its name was Worldview when it was established in 2012. The company had plans to build a slightly larger constellation of more than 1,000 satellites when its initial plans were publicized. It was based in the United Kingdom first, but while seeking investments, it ventured out in North America and particularly had discussions related to investments coming from SpaceX. They had discussions with Lockheed Martin. They had discussions with a host of other North American entities. None of them fructified. Google was another major potential investor into OneWeb, but that too did not proceed anywhere. Subsequently, when OneWeb, with its name OneWeb, crystallized, it had planned for nearly 650 satellites, of which by the beginning of the COVID-19 global pandemic, they had launched nearly 75 satellites. But with the coming in of the pandemic and the financial consequences that the pandemic brought to a lot of companies around the world, OneWeb too was in a financial distress, and they filed for bankruptcy in March 2020. Now, this was the period when here in India, the NSIL had just been established. The NSIL was established in March 2019, and it did not have a solid business to show till then. And unforeseen COVID-19 pandemic did not show any promise of any new business around then. Subsequently, out of nowhere, the Indian government announces the space reforms in the month of May 2020. And later, just within a month, OneWeb publicized that they are exiting bankruptcy because they've got a new financial injection from the UK government and the Bharti Enterprises, which is the parent company of Airtel. Who would have expected that Bharti Enterprises and the UK government would have joined hands to rescue OneWeb from an extreme financial distress, especially at a time when OneWeb had already had discussions with a host of other space and technology companies around the world. After the financial inclusion or the financial injection that came from the UK government and Bharti Enterprises, OneWeb was still launching its satellite as it had done even before the pandemic, using the Russian Soyuz 2 launch vehicle. And this continued until the February of 2022, and it suddenly came to a stop or a halt when European investors in OneWeb, as well as European and North American investors in OneWeb, sort of pushed OneWeb to cease business with Russia. This cessation of business with Soyuz 2 came in as an unforeseen opportunity for LVM-3 to make its mark. LVM-3, in its earlier avatar as the GSLV Mark III, was launching satellites and spacecrafts weighing up to 3.5 tons. It had to undertake engineering modifications in a way that it becomes capable of launching payloads up to 5.5 tons. And LVM-3 exactly did that. So when the business with Russia stopped, there were only two options before OneWeb. One was to go with SpaceX, which is a competitor for OneWeb through its flagship service Starlink, and LVM-3. The Chinese Long March 5 was not an option for the Europeans. So when SpaceX and LVM-3 were onboarded as the launch vehicles for launching the remainder of OneWeb satellites, it was LVM-3 that took the first step in October 2022 with the launch of 36 satellites. Thereafter, there were a series of launches that happened from the United States through Falcon 9 of SpaceX. And this Sunday, on 26th of March, NSIL fulfilled its commitment of launching 72 satellites for OneWeb. And while doing so, LVM-3, the heavy lift launch vehicle of ISRO and NSIL, it established itself as the next big commercial heavy lift launcher. Now this has immense ramifications for India. India has now established itself as a go-to country for not only medium lift launches but also heavy lift launches. You already had the PSLV as the workhorse in the 1.5 to 2 tons category, and now you have the LVM-3 in the 5 ton plus category. This is a major opportunity for India to bring in new vigor into its newly reformed space ecosystem. What is this Indian space ecosystem asking for? Indian space ecosystem is looking for large business contracts. Now, business contracts is something which is very necessary for any ecosystem to really flourish and come up. In India, we've always seen a tug of war between European entities and American entities for selling defense equipments and platforms to India. We have to exactly take a similar stance. We have to assert as Indians, as an Indian space ecosystem, for getting new contracts. And there is an opportunity here. Through Bharti Enterprises, India has a major leverage in the shareholding pattern of OneWeb. And that also makes Bharti as one of the biggest potential satellite communication service provider, especially from the low Earth orbit in the world. At present, most of these OneWeb satellites are launched or are manufactured from the United States. They are manufactured in Florida through an arrangement that is between Airbus Defence and Space and the company OneWeb. India will have to explore opportunities where OneWeb and Airbus are together invited to India and they start building satellites here in India with as much indigenization possible. It can be done in this particular way, where the OneWeb satellites that are launched from the United States are built in Florida, whereas the satellites that are launched from LVM-3, from Sriharikota, they are manufactured or they are built over here, let's say in Sriharikota or in Chennai or in Hyderabad or Bengaluru. India's space ecosystem is capable of building satellites. There is a cost element in India which is really attractive. Building satellites in India and getting them launched from India is going to be a lucrative opportunity, and India should be availing this opportunity. So with Bharti's large stakes in OneWeb and with the LVM3 acquiring a commercially ready tag, it becomes very easy for India to put forth such a proposition before OneWeb. And this not only has ramifications for OneWeb, any constellation that is built, be it for remote sensing or be it for medium Earth orbit, MEO, or the geostationary orbits, these satellites, if they are to be launched from India, they should be built from India as well. India should make it more attractive for investors to come and set up their manufacturing units, and the supply chains and the value chains that reside in our country should be made strong enough so that there are no glitches in getting these satellites or spacecraft or their components manufactured here in India. The LVM3 success opens up numerous opportunities for the Indian space ecosystem, and it is time that we tap into them. This is it for today's episode. Keep watching Interstellar and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our social media handles. Thank you.